guys, welcome back to Homestead 215. It is a beautiful day in February. It's actually about a high of 52, I think is supposed to be our high today. I have been waiting and waiting to get started on sowing some seeds. And I would like to show you guys a method that I've been using for a couple years now, and one that is just, I enjoy doing it so much, and it's had so many good results for me that I probably will continue doing it for many years. I still do sow some seeds regularly indoors, and I'll put some in my little mini greenhouse as it gets warmer. But this is a way for me to start sowing seeds even in the middle of winter. I had some milk jugs in my garden last year that I showed you just as I was giving you a quick little glance of the garden. There were milk jugs everywhere. Those were winter sown jugs with seeds planted in them, and I put them out in the beginning of February or even late January, some of them, and I'm going to be doing that again today. So I am actually in my garage right now because a lot of my winter sow jugs from last year are just in here to store, and it's so bright outside I wasn't going to get good lighting, so I figured we'll just sit in here and do this. So first of all, let me tell you a little bit about why winter sowing. Like, why would someone choose to do winter sowing? When you plant a seed, it has to germinate, and so a lot of times when you plant direct sowing into your garden, the soil has to be warm enough for your seed to begin to grow. When you winter sow, you're basically putting it out into really cold weather. Sometimes it can be, below freezing, and that's still fine, but the seed will not begin to germinate until that soil reaches warm enough soil for the process to begin of germination. So letting it sit outside helps with the cold stratification process. And most seeds, if you think about like seeds that are plants that grow throughout the season, and you have flowers or different, like let's say a tomato falls to the ground and it just biodegrades over time, the next season sometimes you have volunteer plants that pop up. You have tomato plants, or you have cucumbers, or you have flowers that have volunteered, and that's because those seeds got buried enough in the soil, or just quite right down in the soil enough, but they didn't germinate right away. They waited over winter. Even with all the cold weather you get, those seeds will stay viable enough to then grow when the soil begins to get warm enough again. So you're basically doing that with winter sowing. So you're taking soil, and instead of a volunteer plant popping up when the soil is warm enough, you're putting the seeds out into the cold weather in basically a mini greenhouse, and you're going to let that mini greenhouse help with keeping moisture in. And so that way, when the soil is warm enough, the seed recognizes that it's warm enough and a good time to start sprouting, it will. Now, the danger of that can be if you have a really unusual week of winter weather where your temperatures do get really, like up in the 60s, 70s for a couple days or a week, and then they go right back down to the 30s. Then at that point, you can risk plants having germinated during that warm week, and then when they drop back down, if you don't protect those seeds that have sprouted, then they can die because of the freeze. So if that happens, what we do is with winter sowing, anytime there's a sprout, and then you see that there's going to be weather that drops down below freezing, you just cover your jugs with a light sheet or a blanket, depending on how cold it's going to get. Last year, I think I had to cover, we had a really cold night, and I'd already had some things that sprouted, and so I covered with two fleece blankets, because it was going to be so cold, and they were all fine. So it is possible, it is doable, even if you have fluctuating temperatures. You just have to keep an eye on if your seeds have germinated, and if they have, then you just have to protect them with a sheet or frost fabric, a blanket, something like that. To winter sow something, you need a container like this, a milk jug, some other kind of plastic container, either with a lid. Plastic containers that strawberries come in at the store, it can be something like that. It can be, sometimes lettuce comes in a big plastic container with a lid. Those are all fine. They just have to be deep enough to fit about 4 inches of soil, and then have enough room above for the plant to grow. Milk jugs are great because they have plenty of space to grow. So any kind of plastic container that's going to give you plenty of room for the plant to grow, and you need to have at least 2 true leaves before you're going to plant it out into your garden. So as long as there's space for that, you can make it work. With milk jugs, you do not need a lid, because it's just a small enough space that's not going to affect too much. With a container like a strawberry plastic container or a lettuce container, those have lids, and so you'll need to poke holes through those lids. And also on the bottom of your jug, you're going to poke holes in for drainage, and sometimes I do some on the sides as well. Now, first thing we want to do is we want to take our milk jug, and you basically want to create a hinge. I'll leave about 4 to 6 inches where there can be soil. You look at a milk jugs are kind of easy for this because they already have a hinge created right where the handle begins. And that still leaves you a good amount of space to put your soil in and to put your seeds in. So I will leave the handle as my hinge. So, and it doesn't matter with these stickers. You can leave the stickers on, you can take them off. It really doesn't matter. It's not going to hinder that much light to have one little sticker like that on. So you're going to start at the handle, and you're going to use, you can use a razor blade, you can use, I've done scissors before. So I'm going to cut that. So now I've got my jug, and there's a hinge. You can see where that hinge is there, and I've cut all around it, and I've got this nice little hinge where I can now close my jug. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it with 4 inches of soil, sprinkle my seeds on top. If it's larger plants that need more space to grow, depending on what they are, I will do about 4, 2 on each side basically, 2 on each side once we get the dirt in there. Now these don't need to be covered very deeply, so like sometimes you'll have, like on your seed packets, it'll tell you to do like 1 inch deep. For winter sowing, you just kind of put the seeds in and very gently just tap them into the soil, maybe very lightly cover them. Depending on what the seeds are, I will put 4, maybe 6. Lettuce I just sprinkle generously, and like bunching onions, I'll sprinkle a bunch of bunching onions together, and that way I can, as I transplant them, we'll just keep them all together anyway. I'm going to go ahead and mix up with soil, and then we'll go from there. So you can see now I've got about 4 inches of soil right in here all the way around. So I've got my soil ready to go, and then you just have to pick what seeds you want to do, and then for this kind of material, because it's going to be sitting out in the sun, markers will fade. I go ahead and I write on the outside of the jug what I planted and the date. This is a paint marker, an oil-based paint marker. I used these last year for the first time, and I had pretty good success with most of them if I kept the jug to where the one side wasn't facing the sun, and I would write on the side that's not facing the sun. If it's facing the sun, it's still going to fade some. They were still mostly legible by the end of the season or by the time I transplanted, but there is going to be some fading. Just in case the sun, if it's on all sides and you're not going to be able to avoid having sun on the outside of your jug, I go ahead and I put a plant marker inside as well. This is an old plant marker from last August when I planted some Swiss chard in the garden. And again, you can see this was in my garden for several months, and it's a little faded, but it's not fully faded. And again, I probably faced this where the sun was not going to be on it as much as the other side of the marker. I reuse these. I can write on top of these with a marker again because it's going to be brighter. So I will take my marker and write down what it is on the inside on the plant marker, and then I will just stick it in. So you're just going to stick your marker in just like you would in the soil, and when you close it, just make sure it closes around the plant marker so it's inside the jug. And then you actually do need to seal these. Once you plant your seeds, close it up. Your hinge is there so that you can open it later, but first you're going to seal it. And the sealing just helps capture that greenhouse effect because the condensation is going to stay in your jug. I have wet soil in here already. I made sure the soil I put in was already good and wet. One of the good things about winter sowing is that I think I've maybe had to water them twice each year. Maybe not even twice, because what happens is as long as there's condensation in the bottle, they have enough moisture. If you have really dry few weeks where you have no rain at all, you might check on them, and if they're not having as much moisture in, then you may go ahead and water them a little bit, but I wouldn't do a ton, just enough to kind of get the soil moist. That is the reason we leave the lids off the top, is because that allows the rainwater to come in, and that way you don't have to be watering your jugs as much. It's going to capture a little bit of that rainwater every now and then when it rains, keeps the moisture in your jug, and it creates a greenhouse effect so that the condensation stays in there and is basically re-watering your plant for you. So one thing I forgot to do before I cut open the jug was to actually poke holes in the bottom. I got too busy talking, so I went ahead and poked some holes. I slit some holes here on the side with my razor blade and made some drainage holes there, and then I poked some holes in the bottom as well. I did have to dump out the dirt to do that because unfortunately once you cut around the jug, it does become a lot harder. They're flimsier and it's a lot harder to poke holes in the bottom. So always poke holes in the jug first because I just forgot to do that. But they're stronger when they're in one piece still, so it's easier to cut your holes. On to seeds. I'm going to layer. You can see I've got my 4 inches of soil in here. I'm going to go ahead and use some MI Gardener seeds today that I just got this season, doing some red long of Tropea onions. And I'm going to do quite a few in here because, again, like onions, these are not going to bulb up in here. So there's plenty of space for me to plant a few rows of onions. And then when I transplant them, I'll separate them out a little bit further in the garden. So I am going to just sprinkle these in here. You can see I'm not really poking holes for these. I'm just kind of sprinkling them up on the tops, and then I will very gently just kind of pat them into the soil. I have my plant marker ready with my date and what these are. These are red long onions, and I'm just going to stick that on the opposite side of the hinge. And I try to face the marker part on the inside. So that way when I'm looking at I sometimes will peek in through the top of the jug, and that way I can see what it says. So if you poke in here, see if I can find there, see, now you can see what it says from just peeking in the top. All right, so you've got the jug, it's hinged and put down over top of your plant marker so you can still see that. You're basically just gonna take your duct tape and you're going to tape over the seam of that now. And then you do want to make sure you press this down pretty tight and secure. If there are any holes, go back and put another piece on just to kind of cover everything up, because again, you are trying to keep out some of the low temperatures. Like, it's going to be cold because it's outside, but once things have sprouted, you definitely don't want that cold air getting in your jugs. And also you've got a better chance of condensation staying in the jug if there's a complete seal. So just kind of make sure that your jugs are fully sealed. Everything is fully covered. So they come together right here at the hinge again. Try not to like tape this so much at the hinge that you're not going to be able to open it later. When the weather starts to get a little bit warmer and you have seedlings in here that are growing and you're going to be transplanting them, what you want to do is you want to harden off your plants. And as you transplant, they'll already be acclimated to the weather outside, the sun. As you get closer, I'll make another video probably again this year about that. But you will start putting them more in the area that they're going to grow so they can get used to the exact type of sunlight that they're going to be getting back for the season, whether it's morning shade, afternoon shade, all that kind of stuff. So the plants are adjusted to that, and they can start getting some airflow in there to get them used to the wind, help them strengthen up. We won't do that until we have true leaves and until we're usually about a week away from transplanting is when I like to start. I'm going to write on my jug here. So I will write 2-6 because that's my date today. And then I'm going to write red long onion. Now again, that's going to fade in the sunlight. So I like to put this side of your jug to where it's not facing the sun most of the day. If you have this side facing the sun where it's getting 10 hours of sun a day, it's definitely going to fade. 6 hours of sun a day, it's going to fade. So I like to put it in my shadiest angle where the sun's not going to hit it as much as the rest of the jug. One thing that I forgot to mention that is important, don't use seed starting mix for winter sowing. So you actually want to use potting mix, because seed starting mix is just not geared for long enough to keep these plants having the nutritional value that they need for long enough, because these are going to be in this jug for a couple months. Maybe, let's see, it's February, March, April. These are going to be in here until at least May, probably, maybe early June for some of them. So several months in here, and you're not amending, you're not doing anything to the soil. So you need to have potting mix, which has a lot more nutrition in it than just a seed starting mix. Seed starting mix is going to need fertilize, it's going to need amendments, and so instead of messing with the jug all the time to do that, just use potting mix. And you can usually buy a big bag of potting mix. So I have got all of these jugs done. I've got them tucked in here in my garden. I've got 19 different jugs done today. I got a mixture of lettuces, kales, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, basils, different combination of things. So I'm trying pink celery this year for the first time. Just kind of a variety of things that I had time to do today. I'm going to do more another day, but I just ran out of time. The chickens, it looks like, are heading out of the garden for the night. Here comes the last one leaving the garden. So we're going to close the garden up for the night so I don't get any other critters in here. Close that up, and then they will probably spend another hour or so out before they go to bed for the night. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.